Hello and welcome to WinXAS tutorials, where I will be talking about opening experimental data files and pre-reduction of XAS spectra. As always, the WinXAS software and the XAS data I will be using in the hands-on session can be obtained from the WinXAS website. Before we can start with the interesting steps of data reduction as shown here, we need to open an experimental XAS file. Depending on the file structure, the XAS spectrum will be shown immediately or will need to be calculated from the data in the experimental file. Eventually, both will result in the spectrum being displayed with absorption as a function of photon energy in keV. When opening an experimental data file, WinXAS can automatically interpret a variety of file structures. However, for this procedure to work, certain conditions must be met as shown here. First, no additional text lines must appear after the data columns. This will result in an error message and the spectrum will not be displayed. Second, all data columns must have the same length. And finally, at least one data column must exhibit a monotonous increase or decrease to be used as x-axis for the experimental spectrum. Many experimental XAS stations do not save data in a 2 or 3 column file. Instead, experimental spectra are saved in a multiple column file where the individual columns may contain, for instance, the count rates of the detectors used for measuring the I0, I1, and I2 signal. In those cases, the software needs to be told which columns contain the photon energy or detector signals and whether the spectrum was measured in transmission or fluorescence mode. Once those settings have been defined, the spectrum will be calculated, displayed, and can be used for subsequent data reduction. Data pre-reduction corresponds to procedures that precede XAS data reduction. For instance, glitches or steps need to be removed from the spectrum because they would hinder data reduction or make it outright impossible. Also, conversion of X or Y axis may be required, for example, to change photon energy from EV to keV. Additionally, procedures like averaging data files or creating multiple column files that can be used in a batch analysis of data from time-resolved experiments will be discussed in another tutorial. Coming next in this tutorial is the hands-on session. Objectives will be opening experimental data files in addition to removing glitches and steps from the spectra. The XAS spectra I will be using are included in the raw data folder of the tutorials data folder, which can be obtained from the WinXAS website. As always, feel free to perform the analysis procedures from the hands-on session yourself and hopefully arrive at the same results. Well, let's get started by opening an experimental data file. This is a file and open. In these tutorials, I will always be using the mouse to make selections, and that is in order for you to clearly see what I'm doing and to be able to reproduce those steps if you want to attempt them on the experimental data as provided on the WinXAS website. However, as you can see here, there are a number of keyboard commands that can be used to select those functions, and they are very beneficial in speeding up data progression. So I strongly recommend you check them out. They are also listed in the manual, And once you get used to them, they can, as I said, significantly increase data processing and make this entire procedure much more time efficient. Throughout the progression during data reduction and data analysis, I will always step out, explain and come back to this possibility of using a combination of keyboard and mouse to navigate through the data reduction and data analysis steps. So file open the data file we want to look at. It's called copper cluster in the raw data folder. We open it. The file contains a multiple column ASCII file obtained from an experimental WinXAS station, and the format is already pre-selected because I've already used this format. So once you're starting to analyze your own data, this will always appear, and you only have to make the selection once, basically, and then you can just easily open all your experimental data file. So energy column and the data column for the detector signals are selected. The spectrum was measured in transmission, so you can just select OK, and this will then load the file, open the file, and calculate the X-ray absorption spectrum, absorption as a function of photon energy in keV. If you now, for instance, want to change the x-axis for whatever reason and want to convert it from keV to eV, you can easily do this by selecting Modify Abscissa, which allows just, for instance, multiplying the axis by a factor of 1000, basically converting photon energy in keV to eV. So, and now you see photon energy in eV. The description here will not change. You have to change this manually if you want to. So this just opens the data file, and now this can be used for data reduction followed by data analysis. Well, before we do this, we want to look at another file that we just open, and it's another extension. It's an ASCII file now. And if we just open this file, it will immediately display the content because it's just a 2-column ASCII file, and there is no calculation that can be done, so this dialog will not appear. Now you see it's a very similar spectrum, but it contains a glitch and a step that needs to be removed in order to progress with the data reduction, in order to use the spectrum at all. So to facilitate glitch removal and the step removal, we will indicate the individual data points. There is a little button up here. And now you can see there's a glitch and there is a step. And the procedure we want to use now is called deglitching in steps. You find it in the Edit menu. It asks for a degree of a polynomial. It will use a polynomial to substitute the data points of the glitch. And normally a degree of 3 offers sufficient flexibility, but not too much flexibility. So select that, and now we can select a region that includes the glitch just by clicking here with the mouse. Go to Show and narrow this region a little bit, so just a few data points left and right of the glitch will be sufficient. And what we want to do now is we want to select the data points of this glitch that we want to have being removed by the polynomial that we are going to refine to the red data points now. So if we click on Fit, this will refine a polynomial to those red data points while omitting the blue data points in the refinement procedure. What we can do now is we can substitute the blue data points by the green data points here of this polynomial by selecting deglitching. and this will remove the glitch. We can go to back, and we see the glitch that was in this region here is gone. The next we want to do is to remove the step. Therefore, we select step removal. Again, we narrow to the region that includes the step, and what you want to do now is you want to select the last and the first data point. So the last data point in the original spectrum and the first data point in the step, or after the step occurred. And you just want to click on step removal, and that will basically bring down this part with the step to the original value. Okay, that's basically it. We can look at the spectrum and switch off the individual data points, and we see both glitch and step are removed, and that spectrum now can be used for data reduction. Just to briefly show the validity of this procedure, we just want to look at the extracted WinXAS function. There is a button here that allows for a somewhat quick and dirty automated data reduction. And we just click that, and then we see we get the background corrected normalized spectrum, the WinXAS chi of k, and the Fourier transform. We want to compare this now to the original data, so we go back to File, Open, and open the data, the experimental data file that we just looked at. Click on OK, and you may have already guessed that the step and the glitch were actually introduced manually, basically to show the validity of this procedure. So now we can have those two windows side by side, and we can compare the two WinXAS chi of k function, and we see they are very similar. So that procedure indeed did remove the glitch and the step, and did not render the spectrum entirely useless. So this may not be a perfect procedure, but it definitely can salvage X-ray absorption spectra that otherwise would be useless and would have been discarded and could not yield any information. So that's it for this tutorial, and I sure hope to see you in the next one.